this stuff is an entire ecosystem of wasting taxpayers' money on stuff like this that most people wouldn't choose to spend their money on. And guess what? If most people wouldn't choose to spend their own money on it, there's no way that you should be forcing your neighbor down the street to pay for what you pretend to want to watch. It is unbelievable, the waste of money here. This is the Canadian Taxpayers Federation podcast, where we are fighting for lower taxes, less waste, and more accountable government. I'm Chris Sims. I'm the Alberta director. I'm actually on the road right now. I'm up in Red Deer, Alberta. My good friends, Franco Terrazzano. There's Franco. He's our federal director. Hi. He is at our embassy there in Ottawa. And right next door to him in the same place is our investigative journalist, Ryan Thorpe. Now, you know when you see Ryan on the podcast that I know. You should probably sit down. Okay. But if you're out, if you're walking the dog or doing the dishes or something, just brace yourself. Because when he sent me this story, I actually laughed out loud with rage because I can't believe it. So, Ryan, you want to start with Ryan, Franco? Can I start with Ryan? Okay. I think Franco's here for color commentary. Ryan, why do taxpayers pay money for circus tickets?
Circus tickets and many other types of tickets as well. So yeah, another day here in Ottawa, another ridiculous government waste story that we've dug up. Turns out taxpayers have been on the hook for $721,000 worth of tickets to the circus, to concerts, to balls, to the ballet, to galas and award shows, to football and hockey games, musicals, and on it goes. And all of this spending, all 721,000 of it, came during a 17-month period. So this was just between January 2023 and June of 2024. And that works out to about $42,000 a month. So the takeaway on this one for taxpayers is you're paying 42 grand a month. So a bunch of federal bureaucrats from here in Ottawa and around the world can go out and enjoy a night out on the town.
Okay. I have some follow-up questions. Number one, like, these bureaucrats are already paid. I just need to stress this because some of our listeners, like, they haven't lived in the belly of the beast. Good for you. They haven't worked in politics. These bureaucrats are already paid. Okay. This is extra stuff that is being paid for them by you, the taxpayer. So you mentioned a few things in there. You mentioned the ballet. You mentioned the circus, like, send in the clowns. Can you give us some details? What kinds of ballets, what kinds of circuses are we paying for? And why? Did they give any justification?
So no justification.
Okay.
The government records that I was going through to put together this story, there was no explanation for why this was needed, what value taxpayers supposedly got out of this deal, and there was no indication that any of this money was reimbursed. In terms of the details, let's start with Global Affairs Canada, a pretty notorious waste offender here in Ottawa. So in May 2023, they spent $6,800 on tickets to Cirque du Soleil in Vienna, Austria. They followed that up a couple of months later with some more Cirque du Soleil tickets, this time in South Korea. They spent a combined $24,000 buying up tickets to a musical called Come From Away. And these were performances in multiple US states, in Japan, in Australia, in Taiwan. Global Affairs Canada dropped $20,000 on tickets to a ball. And that's just one department. This was spending across all departments. So a couple other quick examples. Canadian Museum of History, they had the priciest single purchase that I saw, which was a $2,500 ticket for their CEO to go to a gala in New York City. Canada Infrastructure Bank dropped $8,000 on a table to an event in Toronto. And Canada Post was the one place we couldn't get details on because they refused to disclose how much they spent on tickets, how much they expensed taxpayers for tickets, claiming that it was financial information and therefore confidential in nature.
It sure as hell is not. I'm sorry. No. If it's taxpayers' money, that is not confidential. If it's their own money, like, I don't care what you're spending your own money on. That's taxpayers' money. It is not confidential, sweetheart. I got to ask you a quick question, and I don't know if you have the answer to it. But did you say a ball? Like, it was called a ball?
Yes, yeah, yeah. It was called a ball in the records in Taiwan.
Okay, so I'm a huge Jane Austen fan. I don't think the term ball has been used for the last 100 years or so. Did they give any details on that? Like,
No, there was very little information beside from like the name of the event that they were buying tickets to, titles occasionally of people that went to it, how many tickets they bought, and how much they spent.
Franco, you've been in Mordor now for a while. Is this surprising?
Don't
to
remind
you?
me. Is this surprising to me?
Yeah.
Well, you know what first came to my mind is just because this government is a circus doesn't mean that bureaucrats should be billing taxpayers for tickets to go to the circus. And you know, if these bureaucrats really wanted to see a circus, they didn't have to bill taxpayers to go to, Vienna or South Korea. They should have just stayed in Ottawa, because in Ottawa, there is no shortage of clowns. So that's a good way to save some money right there.
This is life imitating art. It really is.
And we get these waste stories from Ryan because of supporters of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation that allows for this investigative journalism to happen. We get stories from Ryan all the time, and I'm always pretty mad. I'm always like, God, man, people are struggling out there. Like, what the heck is the government doing? But as I was reading this, I was infuriated.
Me too.
Infuriated. $721,000 on tickets to circuses, balls, galas, sporting events, ballets, you name it. $721,000 of other people's money.
Yeah.
Folks, over a 17-month period, they're billing you for $42,000 a month to go to these primetime events across Canada, in the US, in Vienna, in South Korea, in Australia, in Japan, in Taiwan, in Poland, in Norway, in Turkey, and other countries. It's absolutely ridiculous. Right now, Canadians are worried about not being able to afford to fill up their fridge with food.
Yep.
And it seems like the biggest concern that these bureaucrats have is worrying that there might be a big pillar obstructing their view at the ballet. And You know what, Chris, you mentioned this, right? These bureaucrats in Ottawa are already overpaid. The average pay, when you look at the salary, the pension, the bonuses, the other perks, the average pay for a federal bureaucrat is $125,000 a year. The average salary in Canada is less than 70 grand. So I'm sure they had a great...
Just a sec. Did you say the average? I think I misheard you. The average is 125?
The average pay, salary, and all the other benefits for a federal government bureaucrat is 125 grand a year.
Oh.
The average salary in Canada is less than 70 grand. Okay, so I'm sure they had a great time at Cirque du Soleil. I'm sure they had a ball. But if they want to go to these events, they should pay for it themselves. And another thing, in the real world outside of government, if you are fortunate enough to have a job where you have to take clients out to events, you better have a good explanation.
Oh, yeah.
Or you got to polish off your resume. Well, what value, if any, did taxpayers get from these bureaucrats going to these events and billing us? Because we know they had a great night out, great couple nights out. So what are we getting for this?
Any word, Ryan, on that note and the accountability factor? Sorry to just ambush you with this question. Any word on if any of this was paid back?
So in the records that I obtained, now these were released just recently. So this is information that just came out in government records. We got our hands on it pretty quick. We just broke the story. So in terms of any sort of accountability, I haven't heard anything yet, at least from the federal government. And there was no indication in any of these documents that any of this money was reimbursed.
Crazy. Okay. To Franco's point, folks, to your listeners and to the viewers, we know we all have family members, we all have friends out there who are struggling. The reason why we're highlighting this stuff to you is two reasons. Because you can either laugh or cry, and you have to be a happy warrior, or you're just going to get bogged down, depressed, and quit the fight. And two, it's because if you tell somebody about this kind of government waste, they get pretty mad, no matter where they are on the political spectrum. So the next time your sister-in-law is saying, oh, well, we can't cut money anywhere, we can't cut taxes, what do you want to cut first? Old people's healthcare or little babies' education? No, how about we cut the ballet trips, right? How about we cut literally the circus tickets? We could maybe start there. So the reason why we get Ryan to highlight all of these awesome stories is because if you have these in your mind when it comes to government waste, makes it a lot easier to explain why we need to reduce government spending. Now, unfortunately, Ryan, this didn't stop there. You have another government waste story for us. And again, it was one of those things, Franco, you probably had the same experience where you're halfway through reading it and you start getting so mad, you have to put it down for a sec. So this one is international film festivals and tickets to them or something that we're paying for. Ryan, what is this?
Well, turns out taxpayers are paying for a whole lot when it comes to international film festivals and bureaucrats going to attend them. So basically, over a 16-month period, the federal government spent $2.7 million flying bureaucrats to these international film festivals. We're talking about the Oscars, a very famous film festival in France, one in Germany, and South by Southwest. There was one in Australia and one in Texas. And so over a 16-month period, $2.7 million for bureaucrats to go to these events, fly out to them, and then essentially throw parties and party it up with taxpayer cash.
What kind of parties are we talking about here?
Well, so some of the details we were able to pull out of the records in South by Southwest Austin, they threw something called a Canada House was the term that they used for it. They racked up $15,000 in spending on plants, on renting plants to decorate this party room. Another $20,000 on furniture rentals. They put down $5,000 for DJ and animation services, $15,000 on a social media champion for this Canada House event. So basically $15,000 for someone to tweet, to post it up on social media.
And just interrupt, just for a normal person moment, nobody cares. Literally, nobody cares. Nobody's waiting on Twitter saying, oh my gosh, what is the Canada House channel going to say about this? Is such a waste of money. Sorry, go ahead, Ryan.
They catered their opening party and reception for a little under $12,000. And that was just one of the festivals. This happened at all of them. In Germany, there was a venue rental for a Canada pavilion that came to $74,000. In France, this was one of the stranger line items. They spent $9,930 on, quote, umbrella stand coordinator services. So I don't know if that's someone to run an umbrella stand and keep track of everyone's umbrellas that they were checking in or something. What? But apparently it cost $10,000. They were expensing professional photographers to come and shoot these events. There was tons of money in decorations for these venues. So just on and on it goes. Basically, bureaucrats taking taxpayer cash and using it to throw parties around the globe at these prestigious film festivals.
Umbrella stand coordinator? Is that what they said?
Yeah.
That got to be lost in translation. That doesn't make any sense. Okay. Franco, again, this is a perfect example of just the crazy amount of waste. And guys, I have to stress, sorry, this is just what we're seeing. This is not all of it. These are little glimpses that we're getting behind this Wizard of Oz curtain here for spending.
Okay. So I thought that I was going to be fun and funny. But I'm so upset. This is driving me nuts. And so just to reiterate a couple things. Number one, Chris is absolutely right. This is just the documents we're getting our hands on. The $2.7 million that they're blowing on these international film and music festivals, or the $721,000 that we just spoke about on the tickets to circuses, ballets, sporting events, et cetera, et cetera. This is just a glimpse. So if there's this amount of little waste, think about all of the wasteful spending happening in the federal government. And that's how you end up with massive spending waste and a $40 billion deficit, which we're seeing now. The second thing that I really wanted to hit home here is, man, I'm upset.
I know. I can see it. Your face is actually red.
This really is driving me nuts. And I want to address a devil's advocate, right? Because I already know somebody on the other side of this is saying, well, don't we have to support the arts? Don't we have to support the arts? Not with taxpayers' money, we don't. And here's two reasons. Number one, in this spending, the $2.7 million on these international film and music festivals, we're not talking about like the local banjo player. You know, like my grandma, who is an artist in the local community. That's not who we're talking about here. We're talking about the Oscars, South by Southwest Music and Film Festival, one of the most famous film festivals in the world, the one that took place in France. So we're not talking about like the community artists or like the banjo player down the road. I'm missing Alberta. That's why I keep saying banjo. But to another point, no, taxpayers shouldn't be funding the arts. Okay,
Thank you. No,
if you are good at music, creating movies, being an actor, you can make millions of dollars if people are actually willing to watch or listen or look at the stuff that you produce. You can make millions of dollars. We don't need the government taking taxpayers' money, subsidizing artists that people aren't willing to voluntarily pay for.
Thank you.
That is a waste of people's money. So when people say, oh, well, doesn't the government need to support the arts? No, the government shouldn't support the arts. Artists, including musicians, actors, producers, they can make millions of dollars if what they produce is good enough that people voluntarily want to spend their own money. For example, I am going to the movies tonight. I am paying with my own money to support the actors and the producers who made that movie. So I'm so sick and tired of the devil's advocate or the other side saying, well, we have to fund the arts. We have to promote the arts. Number one, this is the Oscars. This is the South by Southwest Music and Film Festivals. And this is $2.7 million that the government blew going to these international music and film festivals. But number two, no, the government shouldn't be forcing taxpayers to fund the so-called arts.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm glad you said that, because it starts getting into, you know, we'll campaign to defund the CBC, for example, but there's so much more than just the money, the more than $1 billion per year that goes into the CBC. It's this stuff is an entire ecosystem of wasting taxpayers' money on stuff like this. Again, we highlight it with our Teddy Waste Awards every year that most people wouldn't choose to spend their money on. And guess what? If most people wouldn't choose to spend their own money on it, there's no way that you should be forcing your neighbor down the street to pay for what you pretend to want to watch. It is unbelievable, the waste of money here. Any follow-up with this, Ryan? Like, what's the next step? Do you just keep on going down that mine tunnel trying to find more government waste, or are we able to follow up with any of these specific stories?
Well, there's definitely a follow-up we can do on specific stories like this that usually involves filing like a round of access to information requests, which, you know, it takes a while to get more records back on that. But it's something we'll definitely look at doing. And then, yeah, in the meantime, it's just full steam ahead and keep trying to dig up more and more of this stuff to make the case that, yes, there is a lot of waste, you know, going on here in Ottawa. And Franco was addressing one of the kind of counter arguments, or maybe a devil's advocate argument. Like, another thing I think I've heard people say before is, well, you know, it's not a crazy amount of money. We're talking about a federal government running a $40 billion deficit, $1 trillion in debt. What's, you know, 2.7 million. But like, these small things, they add up over time. You know, how did you get to 2.7 million on this one particular story? Well, 15,000 here for plants and, you know, 30,000 here for furniture. So this stuff adds up. But even more than that, you know, we've said it on this podcast before, but if you can't do the little things right, how are you supposed to do the big things right? And so this is just emblematic of a culture of waste and overspending in Ottawa, which is why I think, you know, we're going to keep digging up these stories, and why it's important to do so is to help make that case.
Yeah. And let me just interject here, because another next step is when I go to finance committee or when I go into the parliament and go to committee, I'm going to have a stack of these stories and say, oh, you don't think there's a place to cut? How about the $2.7 million on these international film and music festivals, the $721,000 on tickets to circuses, ballets, balls, the $8 million the government spent building a barn, the $220,000 Trudeau spent on airplane food during a 6-day tour of the Indo-Pacific region, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Don't forget your sex toys in Germany.
The sex toys in Germany. The sex toys in Germany, that happened, folks. Or the fact that the government, spent like 12 grand paying seniors in other countries to talk about their sex lives, and they weren't even Canadian seniors, folks. We were outsourcing old people sex stories. I'm back at being happy. I'm back at having fun again. Thank you so much, Chris. My favorite story. But, to really make sure that this podcast isn't fully derailed, folks, it's your support that allows us to have Ryan to do his job so that we can go to committee and push back against those politicians. And we can be like, yeah, there are places to cut. So get off your butts and start doing the job that taxpayers are paying you way too much to do. So it's your support that allows this to happen, to actually push for change and to build support among the public to push the government to cut spending.
Yeah, for sure. And I got to say, folks, bookmark that. When you see us send out our email or saying Franco is going to committee, that is a show you do not want to miss. That is quite the performance. And now he's got this stack of stories from Ryan's work because of folks like you who donate to the Taxpayers Federation. He's got a stack of ammo sitting there to use as an example every single time they say, okay, well, where do you want to cut? Okay, I'm glad you asked me that. How about here? It is a remarkable performance, so don't miss that. We will let you guys know the next time Franco is going into the lion's den. Are we ready for our taxpayer pro tip, gentlemen? Awesome. Who would like to start, Franco or Ryan?
Yeah, I'll give her.
Okay, go for it.
It's on this line. So my taxpayer pro tip actually goes out to Mr. Pierre Poilievre. Look, the polls show that if an election were to happen today, Poilievre would form the next government. And to Poilievre's credit, he said a lot of good stuff, like he wants to fix the budget. So my pro tip goes out to Mr. Poilievre. If you are to form the next government, holding the line on spending is not enough. Keeping spending below some target like inflation and population growth, it's not enough. Not after what we've seen from this government over the last, very long time. With this out of control spending that we've seen for a decade plus, what we need are actual spending cuts. So Mr. Poilievre, the pro tip, if you are to form government, you got to actually cut spending.
And we've got a list we can start with. Just take it right off the website. Ryan, what's your taxpayer pro tip for this week?
So my pro tip goes out to our federal bureaucrats here in Ottawa. There's a whole lot of them these days, 367,000.
That's an infestation. I'm just going to say that's a lot.
Well, we keep digging up both stories today related to expenses. So my pro tip goes out to them. Don't expense anything that you're not comfortable ending up in the newspaper, because we're watching, we're going to keep digging, and we'll find it.
Excellent pro tip there, Ryan. So mine is quite localized, and that is, of course, the carbon tax here in Alberta. Why bring that up? Because, of course, we've got the NDP kind of getting cornered now on the carbon tax. So we have the federal leader, Jagmeet Singh, signaling a lane change on this, sounding like he might eventually want to scrap the carbon tax federally. Big one is the BC Premier, NDP Premier David Eby, saying, hey, if the backstop's gone, I'll scrap the one here in BC. That's huge. Then there's one really prominent NDP leader who hasn't said anything about the carbon tax, and that's Naheed Nenshi here in Alberta. Every time a journalist tries to pin that guy down with a yes or no on the carbon tax, he evaporates into orange smoke. So it is incumbent upon all of us. Email Naheed Nenshi. Email your local newsroom. Say yes or no. Are you in favor of a provincial carbon tax happening here in Alberta? Yes or no? So that is my mission to the Army. That is my taxpayer pro tip for this week. Fellas, any final parting shots here, or can I wrap us up? All right, folks, if you want to join the Army, it's super simple, okay? And it's really fun, because when we all say push, we can push pressure on a politician, and all of a sudden miracles happen, and they change their mind and they make better decisions. So head over to our website, taxpayer.com. Sign the petitions that matter to you, okay? If you want to scrap the carbon tax, if you want to defund the CBC, if you want to stop the gun grab, we got something there for everybody. Sign your name, and now you're on our taxpayer army. The next time it's all time to do the big push, you'll be on that army. So head on over to our website, taxpayer.com, sign our petitions. That's how you can stand up and be heard.